Hello, Passover people. I wanted to share a few words with you about this Passover season, specifically what to think about as you are going to a Seders or going through the Seders or going through this week, to think about more fully what our salvation is, what it does mean and what it can mean for us, right? So there are 7 yearly divine appointments, and there's 1 weekly divine appointment, that's Shabbat. But these 7 yearly are what I want to just speak about briefly today. This is just a highlight, seeing and understanding Yeshua, whose name means salvation, through these feasts in Leviticus 23 that we are to know in order to better understand and to keep gaining that wisdom and that knowledge and that experience of Yeshua, salvation, and the order in these divine appointments, okay? So we'll just take Shabbat and we'll put it aside for a minute. That's the first one that's mentioned in Leviticus 23. Because when you look at the rest of these 7, you see that they all have part, and these are called the feasts of the Lord, the feasts of ADONAI. They all contain elements of Shabbat. That is both a time, it's both time and it's a state of being, okay? So I just want to go through these briefly again so that you can see how Yeshua is in every part of these feasts, okay? So let's start with the first one, with his Passover. To start it, the people will be having Passover Seders tomorrow. We'll be hosting one tomorrow evening, okay? And when you look back through the scriptures, we're told Yeshua's Last Supper, right, with his disciples was actually a yearly Seder. It was the Passover Seder, and he held an early one the day before, which would have been today, the 13th of Nisan, is when he would have had this early Seder with his disciples. So looking back, and we're doing this in remembrance, which that's another very powerful word. If you look up the word remember and you see how many times it's used in the scriptures, just the word zakar, remember, is used like 231 times. And that is a revelation that God has continually been speaking to me over these past weeks and months and year even. But when we say remember, we're just like, oh yeah, I remember this. And then, we don't really do anything about it. We just think it's a mental thing. But in God's economy, God's definition of remember, you can go back to the law of first mention. The first time that word is used is he said, and God remembered Noah. So the way God defines remembering is by doing. So God just didn't say, oh yeah, I remember Noah, and then he went on, doing everything. No, he remembered Noah by acting. He was acting on Noah's behalf now. So that should teach us what remembering really is, according to God's definition of things. God's definition of the word zakar, or remember. So Pesach. So let's see. This is where the blood of the Lamb is over the door. Yeshua, right? Say, Ha Elohim, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. So that very first one, Pesach, this is the blood of the Lamb that takes away the sin of the world. Now, we're remembering it, we're acting upon it and acting it out even tomorrow night. We're remembering and reactivating and recalling in our minds that he has taken us out of Egypt, which Egypt means bondage. So God is delivering us, right, from sin, dysfunction, the darkness of death. He's delivering us from these things. And watch the progression here. The next, right on its heels, is the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is where we remove the chametz from our lives, remove the leaven from our lives. Now, this is very interesting because this is what James is talking about obvious evil or obvious dysfunction. Okay, and going back to the Levitical system, there was no sacrifice for willful sin. It was unintentional sins. The sacrifices were for unintentional sins, drawing near, thankfulness. So there were all these different kinds of ways to draw near to the Lord, which is what the word korban, sacrifice, means. It's a way of drawing near. All right. So God tells us, I'm delivering you. Remember, I'm delivering you from bondage. I'm delivering you from sin and all of its associations of darkness with death and dysfunction, right? But you have to be the one to leave. You've got to actively leave that place of bondage and don't do intentional sin. Feast of Unleavened Bread. Okay, get rid of that chametz, because James teaches us that God is not going to deal with there's a lot of unintentional, some not so obvious sin in our lives that God's not going to deal with until we've done the business and the activity of doing away with the very intentional and rebellious, obvious evil, right? So you can see that in James, and please go back and read James 1, 2, and 3, because that builds and it shows you what we're talking about. So we're leaving now. We're leaving Egypt behind by getting rid of obvious evil. Okay, and then next is the Feast of First Fruits. Now this has to do with resurrection. This is part of our resurrection. Leaving behind, right? Actually leaving bondage and doing away with obvious evil, those things that we are willingly holding on to. You have to do away with it if you want to be resurrected, which leads to the fourth feast, Shavuot. This is a receiving on our end. So we've left behind those things, and now we're receiving spirit and truth. Okay, it was given to us in two parts for us to see. Spirit and truth, or the spirit of Torah, the spirit of Emet, the Ruach of Emet, he's always been. See this in Genesis 1. The spirit and the word has always been, but it was given to us in these parts so that we can see. Once in Exodus and once in Acts. Spirit and truth. So receiving, do you see the progression? You're active. I'm active in this salvation. I'm active. I need to understand what salvation is, who salvation is. And I need to walk with him through these feasts to understand better my own salvation and my time here on earth, right? And then the next one is going to be the Feast of Trumpets, the Rosh, HaShanah, Yom Teruah. This is going to be a time of alerting those who are still asleep or maybe have fallen asleep, and awakening, right? We're awakening everybody. Now this is also a battle cry to understand there is a war, and we're either being slaughtered by the enemy or we're doing some slaughtering of what is wickedness and sin, which is what God has taught us to do, because everyone needs the light of Yeshua, salvation, in these feasts, okay? And then Yom Kippur, the atonement or at-one-ment. We can see now this is going to be, we can see how our salvation, our maturity is, this revelation is going to continue. God, the Spirit of truth is going to continue to mature us for our mission, right? Here on this earth, because you have a mission to bring heaven to earth, on earth as it is in heaven. This was Yeshua's prayer to his disciples, teaching his disciples how to pray, which means how to judge yourself so that you stay on mission, so that you are that light. Okay. So, and then this very last one, this last feast, this eighth feast, is Sukkot, or the Feast of Tabernacles. This is where we dwell. So you see the progression. Do you want to dwell? Do you want to abide? You want to abide with Yeshua, our Messiah? Abide in ADONAI ELOHEINU. You want to abide? Then you're going to have to understand and keep understanding these feasts in Yeshua, who is our salvation. All 8 of these feasts are divine invitations to know Yeshua, our salvation, who is the Ruach, who is the Torah. He is the truth, right? And where the Spirit of the Lord is, there's liberty. And Yeshua said in John 8 again, if you abide in my word, that means we're walking in the word because we know the word and we're convinced by the word. We're walking in the word. And Yeshua says, then you're my disciples. You will know the truth, and this emet is going to continue to free you. This is the plan of salvation. So we can see it all in these feasts. Okay. There's going to be a ninth divine invitation that's yet to come, right? And that is the marriage supper of the Lamb that we read about in the book of Revelation. So some of you people who've been through the Musar, the 21-day Musar life journey, the course, right? You know that 9 is very significant in the scriptures. It represents spirit and truth, but it also represents judgment and destruction when we're choosing that. In other words, it goes back to this: if we're willfully sinning and we're willfully rebelling the spirit of truth, we're rejecting and blaspheming the spirit of truth. We don't want salvation, because that's what salvation is turning to the light and doing away with this obvious evil. Okay, so think about that as you come, and you're going to have to watch this video again to see and hear something new every time. Seeing salvation, that the Yeshua is in all 8 feasts, all 8 divine appointments, from Shabbat to Sukkot. It's all about rest, restoration, and dwelling in the presence of Hashem. So have a great Seder, a great Passover. I'm encouraging everybody to do their own home Seders, just stumble through it like I do every year, just stumbling through it with some people that I love around me, because the Spirit of truth is working and teaching us. Remember that is action, okay? God's economy, the word remember means to act. So have a wonderful time. Have a beautiful Passover. And I'd love to hear thoughts. And I'd love to just correspond with you on things that you're thinking about as well. So have a great day. Bye-bye.